Hello and hi, welcome back. Welcome if it's your first time here. It's currently 2 a.m. And I am just now finishing. I didn't even finish. I just reached a stopping point that I thought was reasonable, and I was like, I need to go to bed. Shopping for supplements. Something to watch out for when buying supplements is the fact that you have to take it in the right form. The chemical needs to be in a form that your body actually absorbs, and the right amount. Too little and it won't reach the amount you need. Too much and it might make you sick or interact with other nutrients that you need, especially if you're taking supplements of other stuff. So I do think a lot of the supplement industry is a scam because of how it's not regulated. So they give you amounts that don't make sense, either because they're not enough or because they're too much, or they give you a form that's not really usable by your body. So like your body only breaks down at like 10% of it, but then they write the amount as the amount of the full chemical or powder or oil or whatever, and it's like that's not how much your body's receiving. So it's intentionally very misleading. They make a lot of money off of that, I'm sure, but it also means it takes a really long time for me to audit my supplements, because I did a whole supplement thing haul last year, and now that I've progressed in my blood work based off of lifestyle changes and trying to be healthier, and also progressed in my priorities. For example, I just found out that there's a supplement that helps with your eyesight if you're on a computer all the time. How did I not know that before? You know, I asked AI so many things about like how can I improve in this? How can I be better in that? At no point did they say, hey, this supplement is proven to help with eyesight if you're on a computer all the time. But hey, I found out now. Yay. So yeah, looking into these new supplements that I want to start taking now that I found out about them, or my need for them, looking into the best form, looking into the best amount, then shopping through websites to find the best price, and that takes a while. But the good thing is that once I buy a bunch, because I buy like 100, 200, 300 day supplies, I'm not going to do this again for several months, possibly ever, because I either am buying lifetime supplies for certain things like B12, or I'm buying a form that's going to be the best value regardless. So I should just keep reordering the one I already found instead of reshopping for some months down the line when I run out of my current supply. So that's part one. Part two, I'm wearing a shirt that says, no matter what you do, just move. I've got a lot of compliments on it today. Wow, I was not expecting it. I was just like putting on a shirt to get out of the house and help my friend navigate. And then I was like, I'll go grocery shopping and I'll run errands. And I was doing that, got some compliments on the shirt, started up conversations about it and everything. And I'm like, oh, the more you know. So for me, that's a note to self. People are looking at what you're wearing, and people are reading the words on what you're wearing. So just because somebody hasn't said anything about whatever you're wearing doesn't mean they didn't notice. Which means something that I think most people know, but I'm still coming around to, is present yourself as well as possible. I was just running around running errands. Look at all the conversations that started. Look your best and present yourself your best, no matter what you think. You're just stepping out of the house for 5 minutes. Those 5 minutes, plenty of people will see you. And you're missing out on compliments and positive interactions and positive impressions based off of just the shirt you're wearing. So I'm taking that a lot more seriously than I used to. Like, of course, I've heard, oh, you should always present yourself well, but I'm like, oh, that's so much effort. But once I, experienced today the benefits of even not necessarily presenting myself well, as in like, dressed up. I'm just wearing a black t-shirt. What that black t-shirt represents about you and how that connects with other people is important. Even if you're just stepping out of the house to grab groceries and some other things. So there's that. Also, part three is I often compare myself to other people. I'm always trying to be better and figuring out like, oh, like what should I be doing that other folks are doing, or what should I not be doing that other folks are doing. I know comparison is the thief of joy, but it's also calibration. So that being said, how do you calibrate without losing yourself in your self-esteem in trying to be other people? I was having a conversation with my friend today, and I realized through the conversation that any trait you're comparing yourself to in someone else has its pros and cons, and its context in which it's helpful and context in which it's not helpful. So her and I were talking about, being irritated and snapping at someone who's intentionally disrespecting you over and over and over again versus like being a pushover. And she was like, oh, I wish I had handled that situation with more grace. And the pushover is like, oh, well, I wish I had actually stood up for myself instead of just letting it go on as long as it did. Right? So they're looking at each other as what they want to aspire to. But the thing I pointed out to my friend, which she appreciated and I also appreciate, and I only came to this thought as I'm having this conversation. When you aspire to have a trait, or you say, oh, this is something about someone else that I wish I had, or I'm working on, or I want to have, you're going to have that trait all the time. You're going to have the pros and cons of that trait all the time. I mean, obviously you can switch on and off things, but for the most part, your default setting is going to tend around that trait. So for example, if you're a pushover, you're often a pushover, but that makes you seem more graceful across the board. And if you're snappy, maybe that helps when people are disrespecting you and pushing your boundaries, but then it doesn't help when people are making innocent mistakes or in a sensitive place, right? So the thing about aspiring to a trait, comparing yourself to a trait, do you want to have that trait all the time? Because my friend was saying like, oh, I wish I'd handled it like this other person who considers themselves a pushover. But I'm like, when you say you want a trait of someone else, you don't get to have it for just the moments in which it's optimal to have it, just the moments in which it's convenient, just the moments in which you wish you could employ that trait. You have that trait across the board. So do you really want that trait across the board? There are certain traits that I think you should have across the board. For example, patience. Being patient is not the same thing as being a pushover. But, for example, said person's brother is very patient and unbothered. It's not that he doesn't stand up for himself, but it's like it takes a lot to really, truly irritate him. I think that is objectively across the board great, right? That's the whole point of Stoicism. Regulating your emotions, managing your emotions, not being easily bothered. The Bible talks about so much how you should control your mind and your heart. Guard your heart. And watch the things you think about. Watch what you say. Do not be easily provoked. So it's like this is a trait that universally you're never losing by not being easily provoked. And it's not the same as not standing up for yourself, because you can be not irritated and still acknowledge that something is wrong and you refuse to allow it. And it's a violation of your boundaries. But you don't have to be irritated, agitated, grieved while you communicate that boundary. So that's like an ideal where it's like, oh, having this trait across the board universally, yes. But most traits just have pros and cons. If you're like super smiley, which is something I'm working on, like in a place where people are friendly, cool. But if you're like a super smiley person in a place where you don't need to be, you might invite attention that you don't want. Negative attention, especially, that you don't want. Or maybe if you're like super, super smiley, sometimes you don't look like you're taking things seriously. You just seem emotionally unmoved, right? That's how I feel about one of my uncles. We're at funerals, this guy's just running around smiling. This is just good vibes. I'm like, your mom just died. What's up? Like, I understand that you don't have to be like in shambles, but you're literally like smiling and giggling and giddy. So it's like, I'm sure his smiliness helps most of the time, but there are cons. And when you have a trait, you have it in all scenarios, or almost all scenarios. To be fair, you can generally control the trait, but for the most part, your brain will just do whatever it's used to doing. Like my uncle smiling at a funeral. Or someone who considers themselves a pushover, allowing someone else's bad behavior over and over again. Or me with my resting bitch face. Even if I'm super happy in a great situation, I look like I'm upset to some people. And all of this is to say is like, there's no right or wrong way to be a human. There's just traits that are helpful to context, and adapt the traits that are helpful to you, leave the traits that are not, adjust accordingly, And as your context in life changes, you might decide you need a different set of traits. That's also an option. And also, don't be upset that you have a trait just because you're encountering a situation in which it wasn't ideal to have the trait. For example, let's say you are super smiley. Don't be upset about being smiley just because you have 1 or 2 situations where it did not work out well. The majority instances where it was beneficial for you to have are probably worth and outweigh the few instances in which it's not ideal. So if you're going to compare yourself to other people, compare yourself and then decide what works for your context. And when you compare yourself, think about the pros and cons of whatever it is that they have that you wish you had. And think about whether you want to have those pros and cons all the time, not just in a few scenarios that you're thinking of.